The knock came at 7:15 a.m. Michael opened his door to find Barbara Henderson, clipboard in hand, pearls gleaming against her crisp blouse. Behind her stood two other HOA board members. Doug Winters, a retired accountant who rarely spoke but always voted with Barbara, and Valerie Simmons, a real estate agent who'd recently joined the board. Mr. Chen. Barbara's smile didn't reach her eyes. We've received several complaints. Michael invited them in, but Barbara declined with a subtle grimace, as if his home might contain something contagious. He noticed Valerie glancing sympathetically toward the twins eating breakfast inside. The Oak Ridge Covenant clearly states, maximum 2 visible vehicles per household. Barbara handed him a violation notice with a $75 fine. And we've had complaints about cooking odors. Section 5.2 prohibits persistent food odors detectable from adjacent properties. Michael glanced at the additional $50 fine for his family's dinner preparation the night before. Maya had made her signature biryani, the spicy aroma briefly filling the cul-de-sac. My sister's family is staying temporarily due to a home emergency. Their house flooded. They'll be gone in 3 weeks, once repairs are complete. Barbara's expression remained unmoved. You should have applied for a temporary occupancy variance. That's a separate $125 filing fee, and the board meets to review applications monthly. She emphasized the word monthly, making it clear that help would not come quickly. After they left, Michael showed the notices to Maya, who immediately offered to find a storage facility for the extra vehicles. Don't, Michael insisted. This is ridiculous. Where are the kids supposed to park? How are they getting to school and work? I don't want to cause trouble, Maya said, her forehead creased with worry. We can figure something out. The next morning, another knock. This time, Barbara had brought her smartphone, photographing the vehicle still parked in the driveway. The fine had doubled to $150. Documentation for the board, she explained, not bothering with pleasantries. And another notice for noise disturbance at 7:45 p.m. yesterday. Michael remembered Samara had been practicing her violin for an upcoming scholarship audition. As the days passed, the fines multiplied. $150 became $450. The cooking odors violations continued despite Michael installing an expensive air filtration system. When the family gathered on the back patio to celebrate Ali getting a promotion at work, a non-approved gathering notice appeared the next morning. By day 10, Michael's mailbox contained a certified letter threatening legal action if all fines weren't paid within 72 hours. At the community mailbox that afternoon, Michael's elderly neighbor Mrs. Castillo approached him, her offered cans clutching a similar notice for her unapproved garden gnome collection. They're targeting you, dear, she confided in a low voice. Barbara's trying to make an example since she became president. Last year it was the Rodriguez family's basketball hoop. Their son Miguel was practicing for college tryouts, and she called it a noise and visual nuisance. Michael Chen climbed out of his 10-year-old Honda Civic, balancing a tray of homemade spring rolls for the neighborhood potluck. Despite being worth north of $50 million, he preferred the anonymity of his modest lifestyle. The other residents of Oak Ridge Estates had no idea that the quiet man in Unit 1422 had purchased the entire 120-home development through his investment firm after making his fortune in renewable energy tech. Michael, over here, called Eliza Johnson from the Community Park Pavilion. Did you bring those amazing spring rolls again? He smiled and nodded, navigating through clusters of neighbors. Oak Ridge Estates was his experiment in responsible landlording, maintaining affordable rents, while creating a true community. He'd purchased the development anonymously through a holding company when a corporate landlord threatened to double everyone's rent. The monthly neighborhood potluck was Michael's favorite community tradition. He moved through the crowd, exchanging greetings with families he'd come to know over the past 3 years. Mr. Okafor from Unit 1389 was showing off photos of his new grandson. The Martinez kids were organizing a soccer game on the grassy field beside the pavilion. This was exactly why Michael had bought Oak Ridge, to preserve these moments of connection. The spring rolls are incredible as always, said Rachel Kim, the elementary school teacher from the unit across from his. You really should open a restaurant instead of whatever mysterious job keeps you traveling. Michael laughed. His neighbors had developed various theories about his profession: consultant, sales representative, even secret food critic. None suspected he was actually attending board meetings for his clean energy company or overseeing his vast real estate holdings. The modest 3-bedroom townhouse he occupied was identical to everyone else's, though he could have purchased a mansion in the exclusive gated communities across town. Just an old family recipe, he replied. Nothing special. As the sun began to set, Michael helped take down decorations and pack up leftover food. Barbara Henderson, the newly elected HOA president, was directing cleanup with military precision. "Mr. Chen," she called, clipboard in hand. "Don't forget the HOA meeting Tuesday evening. We'll be discussing the new vehicle regulations." Michael nodded politely, though he had no intention of attending. In the 3 years he'd lived here, he'd never bothered with HOA politics, trusting the community to govern itself reasonably. His property management company technically oversaw the HOA, but he'd instructed them to maintain a hands-off approach unless absolutely necessary. That evening, as Michael drove home, his phone rang. It was his sister, Maya. "Michael, I hate to ask this." Her voice cracked. "The pipe burst destroyed everything. Insurance is dragging their feet, and the kids are sleeping on Aunt Pryor's floor. Come stay with me," he said without hesitation. "All of you." 2 days later, Maya's family arrived. Her husband Ali, teenage twins Samira and Jamal, their golden retriever Scout, and 4 vehicles: Maya's SUV, Ali's work truck loaded with salvaged possessions, and the twins' used cars they'd saved up for themselves. Michael helped them arrange everything in his driveway, not giving a second thought to the HOA regulations he'd never bothered to fully read. That night, they ordered pizza and sat in his living room amid hastily arranged air mattresses and suitcases. "I can't thank you enough," Maya said, her eyes still red from crying about their damaged home. "It'll just be for a few weeks until the contractors finish." "Stay as long as you need," Michael replied, watching Jamal and Samira arguing good-naturedly over the last slice of pizza. "It's nice having a full house for once." Little did he know that across the street, Barbara Henderson was already taking photos of the vehicles from her window, a disapproving frown on her face, as she composed an email to the HOA Enforcement Committee. That evening, Michael received an anonymous email from a neighbor with screenshots from a private HOA board message group. Barbara had created a dedicated thread titled 1422 Oak Ridge Compliance Issues, encouraging certain neighbors to report Michael's violations. Most refused, but a dedicated few supplied her with time-stamped photos of the vehicles and complaints about overcrowding changing the neighborhood character. One message from Barbara stood out. "This is exactly the type of multifamily occupancy that decreases property values. If we allow one violation to slide, soon Oak Ridge will become indistinguishable from those overcrowded developments across town." Michael stared at his screen, a cold anger building. This wasn't about rules anymore. This was about who Barbara deemed acceptable in her vision of Oak Ridge. When the fine total hit $1,200 and Barbara sent notice of an impending property lien, Michael finally called his attorney. "She's doing what?" Julie Pattle's incredulous voice came through the speakerphone as she reviewed the violation notices Michael had forwarded. "Michael, you literally own the ground beneath her feet. These fines are unenforceable." "I've never wanted special treatment," Michael explained, pacing his home office while Maya's family tried to keep quiet in the living room. "But this isn't about me anymore. She's targeting any family that doesn't fit her vision for Oak Ridge." Julie was silent for a moment. "Did you know she's trying to change the rental policies? My paralegal lives in Oak Ridge and mentioned the HOA is pushing through amendments to prohibit renting to multiple family units and requiring credit checks for all household members, even temporary guests." Michael stopped pacing. "That would force out half the community. The Dyers family has grandparents living with them. The Johnsons just took in a nephew who needed a fresh start." "Exactly," Julie replied. "Look, I know you wanted to be hands-off, But sometimes being a good landlord means protecting your tenants from people like Barbara. That evening, Michael found Jamal sitting alone on the front steps, shoulders slumped, staring at his phone. "What's wrong?" Michael asked, sitting beside his nephew. "Some lady took pictures of me getting into my car today," Jamal said. "When I asked what she was doing, she said she was documenting violations. Made me feel like a criminal for existing here." He showed Michael a text from his friend Miguel Rodriguez. "Sorry about the HOA hassle. Same thing happened to my family last year. They hate anyone who doesn't fit their mold. Something hardened in Michael. This had gone beyond bureaucratic pettiness. His plan formed quickly. First, Julie filed paperwork transferring HOA oversight authority back to his property management company, a right he'd never exercised but had maintained in the original development contracts. Next, Michael used his tech background to create a secure community forum independent of the HOA's channels. He began posting historical information about affordable housing, community rights, and local governance, careful not to reveal his ownership yet. Within days, dozens of neighbors had joined, sharing their own HOA horror stories. The Rodriguez family with the basketball hoop, the Patels who were fined for Diwali decorations, the elderly widower written up for having his adult daughter stay while recovering from surgery. Michael worked late into the night, reviewing the HOA bylaws and founding documents that his property management company had on file. He discovered Barbara had selectively enforced rules, ignoring violations from board members and friends while aggressively targeting others. "This isn't just unfair," he told Maya as they sipped tea one evening. "It's possibly illegal discrimination." Maya studied her brother. "I've never seen you like this. Usually you're so passive." "I've always believed in letting communities govern themselves," Michael replied, "but I never intended for people to use my property as a tool for exclusion." Meanwhile, Barbara pushed for an emergency HOA meeting to vote on stricter occupancy rules that would effectively force Maya's family out immediately. The meeting notice slipped under everyone's doors, cited recent violations threatening neighborhood property values as justification. Michael received a call from Mrs. Castillo the next morning. "Dear, they're trying to force a vote when most working folks can't attend. 3 o'clock on a Tuesday. It's like they don't want people to have a say." "They don't," Michael replied, his resolve strengthening. "But that's about to change." The emergency HOA meeting was held in the community center's main room, a space usually reserved for yoga classes and children's birthday parties. Barbara had strategically scheduled it for 3 p.m. on a Tuesday when most working residents couldn't attend. She didn't notice that Michael had arranged for Julie to provide legal documentation to anyone needing time off work to attend a civil housing rights proceeding. The room was packed. Michael spotted the Rodriguez family, the Patels, and even Mr. Wilson, the elderly widower who rarely left his home after losing his wife. Barbara tapped the microphone, appearing momentarily startled by the turnout. She recovered quickly, smoothing her blazer as she spoke with practiced authority. "As you know, property values are our primary concern at Oak Ridge Estates," she began, gesturing to a PowerPoint slide showing neighboring developments with declining values. "The Chen residence situation represents exactly what our community standards are designed to prevent." Michael raised his hand politely. Barbara ignored him, continuing her presentation about maintaining neighborhood character until several others pointed and called his name. "Mr. Chen, we're discussing policy, not individual violations," she stated coldly, an edge of irritation in her voice. "Actually," he said, standing, "I'd like to discuss the legal basis of the HOA's authority." Michael walked to the front, Julie beside him with a slim leather portfolio. He could feel Barbara's glare as he connected his laptop to the projector. "The HOA exists through a charter granted by the property owner," Michael explained, displaying the original development documents. "And as of 3 years ago, Oak Ridge Estates has been owned by Chen Community Investments." A murmur swept through the room. Barbara's face contorted in confusion, her fingers gripping the podium. "What are you talking about?" "This development was purchased by Evergreen Holdings." "My holding company," Michael clarified, as Julie distributed documents to the board members. I've been content to let the HOA operate independently, believing it served the community's interests. Recent events have proven otherwise. The room erupted. Mrs. Castillo clapped her hands in delight. The Rodriguez family exchanged astonished looks. Mr. Patel broke into a wide grin. Barbara sputtered, her face flushing deep red. This is absurd. You can't just. I can and I am. Michael replied calmly. Effective immediately, I'm exercising my rights as property owner to dissolve the current board and establish a new community governance structure. He projected a presentation outlining his vision, a representative council with tenant protections, hardship accommodations, and cultural sensitivity requirements. Michael watched as residents began to realize what this meant. No more arbitrary fines. No more discrimination disguised as standards. The new council will include elected representatives from each section of the development. Michael continued. And one more thing. I'm canceling all outstanding fines and establishing a community emergency fund, starting with $50,000 for families facing housing crisis, medical emergencies, or natural disasters. The room burst into applause. Mrs. Castillo wiped tears from her eyes. The Rodriguez children high-fived each other. Even Doug Winters, Barbara's loyal board member, seemed relieved. Barbara stormed toward the exit, knocking over a chair in her haste. Michael intercepted her at the door, handing her an envelope. Your final violation notice, he explained, loud enough for nearby residents to hear. Section 1.1 of the new community guidelines. No resident shall use position or privilege to demean, exclude, or harass any other resident. The fine is forgiven if you choose to participate in next month's cultural diversity potluck. Valerie Simmons approached Michael after Barbara left. I joined the board hoping to make positive changes, she admitted, but Barbara controls everything. I'd like to help with the new council, if you'll have me. Michael smiled. That's exactly what Oak Ridge needs. People who care about community, not control. 3 months later, Michael hosted a community celebration in the park. Maya's family had moved back to their renovated home, but returned for the event. The new community council had already approved playground improvements, translation services for community documents, and a rotating cultural celebration calendar. As Michael watched children playing on the new basketball court, the Rodriguez family's son teaching Jamal a new move, his phone buzzed with a news alert. Barbara had announced her candidacy for city council on a neighborhood values platform. He chuckled and turned back to the grill. Some people never learned, but his community certainly had. The sign at the entrance to Oak Ridge Estates now read, all families welcome here, however they come, however many cars they have.